전국적인 부모연대 10주년 기념식에 맞춘 우리 기념 토론회 모든 날 모든 순간 우리 지금 중요한 10주년 행사 중에 기획 토론의 세 번째 섹션으로 준비된 시설에서 지역사회로 스웨덴의 시설 폐쇄법을 중심으로 하는 내용을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 네, 이 발표를 위해서 정말 멀리에서 오셨거든요. 우리가 스웨덴 하면 한국 사회에서는 복지 선진국, 그래서 사실 너무 부러워하고 교육이나 복지나 특히 장애인 관련한 서비스라든지 너무 부러워하는 나라 중에 하나예요. 근데 이 자리에 모셔서 이렇게 거기서 진행되는 그런 현실의 이야기들을 함께 나눌 수 있어서 너무 영광이고, 우리 멀리서 오신 우리 리타 씨를 큰 박수로 모셔보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 저희가 스웨덴의 저희 박옥순 씨 아십니까? 혹시 저희 운동판에 있는 그래서 스웨덴의 박옥순 씨 같은 느낌이다 이런 말을 했는데요. 정말 열정적이고 정말 긴 세월을 탈선을 위해서 정말 활동해온 분입니다. 같은 자리에서 이렇게 뵙게 돼서 저도 참 영광이고 여기 있는 분들도 2시간 동안 알찬 토론이 될 수 있을 거라 생각합니다. 우리 그러면 리타 씨께서 그 발표하는 자리가 이 앞에 여기서 프레젠테이션이 약간 가리긴 하겠는데 약간 이렇게 약간 비켜주셔서 이렇게 발표하도록 하겠습니다. 그럼 자리에 모시겠습니다. 감사합니다. 지금부터 1시간 정도 발표하도록 하겠습니다.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to South Korea. It's first time in my life in this country, and I really enjoy. And it's nice to be invited to talk about an issue that has been interesting for me. Those last 40 years I have been working in disability issues in the city of Stockholm in Sweden. I have met some of your friends when they visited Stockholm, and I understand that you have very big interests about hearing how did we manage closing institutions for people with different kind of disabilities in Sweden, and especially institutions for people with intellectual disabilities, because it was just those groups who were last in our institutions in Sweden. I hope I will successfully tell you about the process in Sweden, and it's good that you have limited that to 1 hour, because otherwise I could speak one whole day and night, because there is so many things to tell about. And I will try to give you also some example about situation for single people with intellectual disabilities, what happened in their lives after closing institutions. And I can already now say that no one in Sweden is longing after institutions today. Because now we have experiences of 20 years life in middle of society, living in ordinary housing or in small group homes with maximum 6 people in each. It's forbidden to be bigger in Swedish group homes, but today it's also the results of closing institutions that young people of today, many of them with intellectual disabilities, they don't want to move to group homes, They want to live in their own ordinary homes, and they want to have jobs as anybody else. They want to have leisure time activities, and they want to have girlfriend, boyfriend, they want to have a dog or cat to take care of, and so on. So today it's interesting to tell about that time, because now we have experiences. How does it look like? Difference between moving from institutions after years of living there, perhaps whole life, and compare that with situation for young people with intellectual disabilities who have been included in society, had support for family, to live together with their sisters and brothers, to live together with their school friends, daycare center friends, and be one of us in society. And there are definitely different kind of dreams about future in their minds, those who have been living together with us all their lives instead of being in institutions. So let's start. I will tell about nothing happens. I can talk without pictures too, but it's perhaps more fun for you if you can also see the pictures. Anyway, we are trying to have technique with us, so should I push this one? No, not that. Oh, show me. I can't Korea. It's only to push. Okay. Okay. Our topics today I'm talking about is about legislation. What kind of legislation did we had, and what was decided by Swedish politicians to close institutions? Then how did we use those laws to really be successful? And then it's also a very important issue. When you close institutions, you have to have legislation that gives parents and families support to live together with the child, young person, adults with serious difficulties because of disability. So it's a very, very important part of closing institutions to also have good support in families. You can't forget it. And then, of course, it's also interesting to see attitudes and roles in society. How was opinions when decision makers were talking about closing institutions? How was situation? What was opinions of staff who were working in institutions when they should be closed? And how was opinions in neighborhood, in society, when you started build up group homes and also move people with serious, sometimes several disabilities to ordinary housing in society? What did neighborhood say? And also, of course, we are today in organization who is celebrating 10 years anniversary. My warm congratulations. How was opinions in families when people with intellectual disabilities should move to society? And when I am talking about closing institutions, here today. It's about people with intellectual disabilities, because those who had movement disabilities, they were already closed in that time that we are talking about now. But we have also people with cerebral palsy and so on, who were living in some big institutions with very medical kind of thinking, also in Stockholm and so on. And they used to tell about their childhood when they moved from their families to those big institutions to live there as a child with cerebral palsy, for instance. But those groups were moved out earlier, and that process we are talking about here now, it's about people with intellectual disabilities, with autism, and also with different kind of brain damage. Yes, when you are talking about closing institutions, it means that you have to change your attitudes when you are talking about people with disabilities. You must change your attitude to see a person with disability as a citizen in society instead of a patient. Earlier, it has been in Sweden typically to think that disability is a disease. But disability is not a disease. You can have sickness when you are living with disability. You can have fever, you can have coughing like I have now, and you have to visit doctor because of that. But when you are living with your disability, you are not sick. You are citizen, but you need same kind and sometimes more services from medical care and rehabilitation and so on than other people. And that's a very, very important change of attitude, to be seen as a citizen instead of a patient. We have to see that people with disabilities have to move and be the part of society instead of being isolated. It has been usual in Sweden that institutions were moved, built up out in a nice park in the corner, far away from city. It was quite often built up close to hospitals, close to medical care centers, also close to elderly care. They were not built up in the middle of the town and in the middle of the city. That means that we have to come from isolation to society, in the middle of that. So people who are living there see and meet people with disabilities in everyday life, on the streets, in the park, in the shops, in leisure time activities, one of us. It's also usual that we see people with disabilities as people with needs. For instance, when people with, you name it, what kind of disabilities are interested about a job, perhaps your employer think that yes, it's perhaps this is not possible because he needs that and he had to go to doctor and he had to be away from working place because of disability. It's that you see the person with disability with different kind of needs instead of see that person as a person who has many, many skills and potential to do things with interests and with possibilities to do something very useful in society, but we have to see that. And that's also an important question to ask people with disabilities. If you think about living in institutions. How many times each person have a question from staff, from you name it, surroundings. What do you want? What's your interests? What's your dreams? How do you see about your future? Instead of seeing all people there as one will, as one group. So it's so important to see each person, because each one has their own possibilities and own interests and skills, and it's our job to pick up them and show interests, to know what are you interested about, what do you like to do. From charity to human rights. This has been interesting for Swedish disability movement, because they have never liked charity. They think that if I have to go to restroom, if I have to take a shower, if I have to take care of myself, I can't wait for somebody who, by charity meaning, has time and will to help me. It's my human right to have services I need in my everyday life in basic needs. Nowadays it's more used with charity because of political situation too, but I know that disability movement is not so very interested about charity in Sweden. It's a cultural issue too. And of course that last one. People with disabilities has always been object for different kind of experts. It has been medical experts, doctors, nurses, psychiatrists, different kind of experts in disability area who says what's best for you, what you should do, and not perhaps so many questions. How do you think your life should look like? And it's a change in attitudes when you move from institutional life to life in society, that you are a participant. You are participating in your life. You have opinion, and we are asking for your opinions. What do you want with your life, instead of always be object for different kind of experts. And it's not to say that experts are just throughout. We need experts, but experts in new time of thinking, they are experts also to talking to individuals and taking care of the individual opinions instead of talking about group of disabilities and group of people with disabilities who those one. We are not talking about those one, we are talking about and with each person with disability. I feel like myself like a priest in church. Ooh. Do you think I sounds like that? When we are talking about legislation, 1960, now you have to remember that Sweden is a very little country. Imagine we are only 9 million people in Sweden. That's so. So it's easy for us to talk about what we did in Sweden, and we have to remember that you are living in a very, very big country, and I have really respect for that. You did like that, no, that's true. 1960 we had 14,000 people living in institutions. And institutions in that time, they were run, an owner was state. And all institutions were really stately. We didn't have private institutions. And that's why it was also easy to decide in state level what we should do with stately institutions. And 1967, you had a legislation named in Swedish Omsorgslagen. That was a law of care, and in that legislation you just express ambitions about moving from institutions. You didn't decide that it must be done, but we must have an ambition to move from institutions to service and support in society. And you see also when you use words, you go over from using word care to service and support. Care is when you are sick, and in Swedish thinking, and service and support, that's services from society. That's anybody can be used when you need that. And that was really first time you had in legislation, you should move from institutions. Then I have later pictures about those people who really were important for this process. But anyway, you could see when you were preparing new law after that law of care, you could see that you didn't move from institutions quickly enough. So in this law 1994, that's we call LSS law, that's special services for some people with disabilities, and that some means those with very special needs. That means also those who moved from institutions. And in this law, you decided that institutions should be closed year 2000. You didn't have so many years left here. You decided you must close institutions 2000, and in this legislation you decided 10 different rights for families and for people with disabilities, and that should be instead of living in institutions. So now you put that together, closing institutions and decide for rights for people with very special needs. Then you could see in 1997 that still it was too little interests in municipalities to build up group homes, and government felt that this work was running too slowly, and they decided some years later special law with final limit 2000, and in that year we should close all special hospitals and all institutions. And what did they said in that legislation? They said that those last 52 institutions, those 52 were smaller now. They were about 1,000 people living in institutions, and it was also decided that after that year 2000, municipalities, locally every municipality will be responsible for people with intellectual disabilities. It shouldn't be state any longer, and it shouldn't be in regional level, it should be in municipalities, locally. People with intellectual disabilities should be citizens in their own municipality. And in that law you decided something very special, and I was part of doing that job in City of Stockholm. We should do individual plans for each person who were left in institutions still and not had moved out. We should do that plan together with that person, with institution when they were living, and municipality where we decided that this person should be responsibility, which municipality he or she should move out to. And sometimes it was that municipality where for years ago that person were found out, for instance, in a box outside a police station, social services or something like that. So you should come back to that municipality where you became found before you moved to institutions. And I have seen people who were 80 years old. For 80 years ago they were found in City of Stockholm in a box and taken care of, and then they moved back to Stockholm. And municipalities were forced to build up service and support and organize that to year 2000 for each person. Now they knew who is that person, where is he going to move, what's the needs, and so on. And there were some group homes, for instance, that were not built up yet. They became not ready year 2000. We were forced to report to stately central administration if that person couldn't move year 2000. So we had to get permission to move a bit later because a building was not ready yet. But 2000, that was definitely the stop. And I don't know how your institutions looks like today, but I heard last week when I was visiting a conference here that you could still find institutions with room where 6 people were sharing one room. Is that true? And that's not home. And it looked like this in Sweden too. And this is, I know that this is an old picture because I can see that on the TV, it's a very old-fashioned one. But it's more about how group homes looks like today. You have your own apartment, you have a little kitchen in your own part of apartment, you have your own bathroom, you don't have built a picture about that. But then you also have common spaces for be together with other living in same group home, to take dinners if you have decided to have dinner together. Otherwise you can decide that I want to have my breakfast, my dinner in my own kitchen. And perhaps you need support for that. But it's individually, how do you want to use those common spaces? And now a very important issue about legislation about those new homes there you should move to. Some people moved to their own apartments in society, but many of those who had been living in institutions, they needed so much support that it was not so successful to move to your own apartment. You needed that social start with some other and especially support of staff. But situation, as I told in the beginning, it's different now because we have not destroyed our young people in institutions any longer, and that's why more of them are moving to their own apartments. Anyway, it was forbidden to build up new places close to hospital, healthcare, elderly care, and so on. And it's absolutely maximum 6 people together in same group home. It's never possible to have more than 6 people, and sometimes if you have people who need very special care with very serious needs, it can be less than 6. It can be only 4, 5. And those group homes we build up, those must be accepted by national authority for inspection of healthcare and social care. And that means that you can't make fake group homes. It must be like you have ordered in legislation. And if you are living in group home, it includes social and medical assistance if you have that kind of need. And you don't have nurses as staff. It's pedagogic staff. Otherwise, nurses, if you need that support, they are coming from ordinary healthcare services. And it is very important issue to also include cultural and leisure time activities. For you and me, if we have life of meaning, we have interests, we are taking part of cultural happenings, we are taking part of sports activities. It's same for people with disabilities. They also have to take part of social life, and it's good for their health and so on. And as I told about when we looked at the picture, there is also common areas for social life in group living for those maximum 6 people. And then I must add here, in group homes, you have not right to personal assistance because you have staff there. That's why it's not possible to have personal assistance when you are living in group home. That means that there are people who says if you have also movement disabilities and you need support with your everyday life, so they prefer to move to own apartment instead and have support of personal assistance instead. And in Swedish system, personal assistance, if you need that for very, very heavy needs, you have that in Swedish social security system and you apply for that. And mostly those you have who have personal assistance, they have about 80-100 hours a week. It's about so heavy needs. You need personal assistance 80-100 hours average every week. If you have less needs, it's not personal assistance. It's other kinds of social services. When you are financing housing, in Swedish system, a person with disabilities is paying housing costs and her food by himself. And of course you think, where to have those money? But in Swedish social security system, if you don't have income enough, you can apply money for your cost of housing. And of course, all people with also intellectual disabilities, they have a pension. They have stately money because of their disability, if they can't take part of working life. And support, this is very important issue. When we had institutions, you had finances for institutions to each house having and so many people living there. It was finances for level, perhaps floor, first floor, second, third, and so on. It was financing by houses, and now it's financing individually. So when you have a decision about moving, for instance, to a group home, in same time you make investigation about your needs, and we have a special system for that. I have been working with that system in City of Stockholm, and if somebody is interested, I can tell more about that. But anyway, that investigation show how much support you individually do have needs of in this living in that group home, and then that group home will receive that resources. Some who don't have so many heavy needs and don't have so much support, it will be less resources for that person. But if someone else had needs of much more, it will be more resources. So individual resources, that's main point. And just, I don't go in each right in this legislation, but Swedish care, service and support for people living in Sweden there are some important legislation. Healthcare legislation for healthcare rehabilitation and technical aid, that's for everybody. Social Services Act for general welfare, economical benefits and personal support, that's for everyone who have needs in Sweden. It doesn't depend on you have disability or not. And then you have the social insurance system, there you have pensions and so on, but also personal assistance if you have very much needs of personal support. And then you have this law, LSS, that came connected to closing institutions. And there you have 10 special rights for people with special needs. And those you can apply them from municipality, and it will be investigated if you have that needs. And that's free. You don't have any payment as disabled person if you receive that kind of needs. Here you have also fees you have to pay, but not by LSS law. And it's very interesting what kind of support you have decided, but it's important if you don't have institutions any longer. I was looking at statistics now, how much support people who are not living in institutions longer have by that LSS law, and its daily activities is the most used right by LSS. And we have still 1,000 children living in group homes for children, and that means that children with very heavy difficulties, their parents have decided that we apply living in small group homes for our child because we don't have possibilities to take care of this child. And observe, parents to disabled children are quite often divorced in Sweden. And it's also the sign of pressure in families. And it's often, of course, mostly women who stays with a child with disability. And they are still parents, they visit them, they are with them as much as possible. But anyway, this is the possibility if family feels that no, this is not possible for us to go on. And for instance, a single mother had to go, perhaps a nurse, working nights and days and so on, and it will be tough to have that. job at home. And then there is also other kind of rights. I must look at what's true. Attitudes. I promised to talk about attitudes. Swedish government made tough decisions. And I can see that it's a bit different when I look at Korea and many other countries. There is relatives and families and so on who are pushing how to close institutions. In Sweden, Swedish government was strong in pushing and in that way. They were so strong, so parents' organizations were scared. They were wondering what's happening when our dear relatives are moving from institutions. What kind of support they will have in future in society. They were a bit scared, and they were not so active at all in closing institutions. But during that trip of planning, they became as cooperators with decision makers, but still a bit wondering what's going to happen. And now Swedish parents don't want back to institutions. Nowadays they are active in protests and demonstrations against cuts in social services. When government are planning, we shouldn't have so much costs for this and that. Then now parents are on streets and say, do we move back to institutions again if you are making those cuts in society? Mostly staff was against moving from institutions to society. And sometimes I can feel a bit tough and say that if you are staff for supporting people with disabilities in organizations and are against moving to society, perhaps you shouldn't work there. Perhaps you should work somewhere elsewhere, because staff have to support to be a part of society. And they had, of course, they could see changes in employment, and they didn't know what's going to happen. Neighbors, they were fair because they didn't have knowledge about people with disabilities. They didn't know what intellectual disability means, what autism means, and so on. They needed to have information that's not dangerous. These people are having support in society. You should be more fair in your own family against violence or neighbors or people on streets. You shouldn't be fair of people with disabilities. So it's important to prepare society to that change. Parents, I said that before, they had fair. Is future support good enough? That was fair in families. And people with disabilities who were living in institutions, how to prepare them? How to prepare people who had never been outside in society? What does that mean? So for many of them, it was not so good possibilities to prepare them to that move. But it was also possible if you really tried. And I have fine stories about that, but let's see if we have time for it. And of course, when we are creating society for all, so people doesn't have to move to institutions, we have to have more knowledge about physical accessibility in society, that everything works. And I think many Asian countries are very good in that. Sweden many times is very proud, and they have a feeling that we are best in the world in everything. And that's not true. When I go around in Asia, I take pictures of things that's good example making society accessible. You are really on so good way in Asia, so Sweden should shame many times in different points of view. Physical accessibility and then accessibility to communication. That we have to be able to talk with each person with disability. No one should be left behind because we can't talk about with him. He can't express his opinion. Everybody can if we really try. And as here have sign language, have braille, have a different kind of communication that helps. We have so much technical aid today. And then, correct treatment. What different disabilities means in everyday life. When I was working in City Hall in Stockholm as Ombudsman for disability issues, I got a job from politicians in City Hall in Stockholm that I should make, in cooperation with disability organizations, a guide of treatment. What was important for people with different kinds of disabilities when we who are working in society, when we who are living in society, what should we know about those different kinds of disabilities? Autism, intellectual disability, hearing problems, seeing problems, and so on, psychiatric problems, medical problems of different kinds. And what should we think about when we meet those people in communication, in physical accessibility, and also in our personal meetings with people with disabilities? And I know that many municipalities in Sweden use that guide now. And I got, for instance, answer from Education for Policemen in Sweden, and they asked if they are allowed to use that guide in the education for police in Sweden, and I was just happy for that. Oh, my time is over. Challenges for future, how to plan for future needs, how to pay for quality in housing, so we are not going down in quality issues, how to be able to have professional staff who knows what human rights for people with disabilities are, how to promote self-advocacy and participation for each person with disability. We have to work with that every day. And this last one, even if we have moved from institutions to smaller units in society, how to stop new kinds of institution manuse. There we have regulation how we are doing in this building instead of how do you want we should do with this and that. We are working with that every day. And sometimes you hear that it's how expensive it will be to move from institutions. Yes, in the beginning it costs money, but I used to say human rights must cost a bit. And anyway, it's investment in human rights to move from institutions. So now from Sweden we can tell you that you get more independent knowledges and possibilities when you move out and you don't live in institutions. You become more independent and you don't need so much support as you need otherwise. And those young people now, they have new kind of dreams. They should never have that if they had been living in institutions. And it's also a new future for parents and relatives. Because today, with these possibilities, you can apply for rights for coming live in same time as your sisters and brothers are moving from home. Parents can feel that, yes, it's future for me too and for all my kids. And because earlier, and also sometimes today, you can hear that parents says, I'm not allowed to die because I don't know who is taking care of my child with disability. And that's a big, big difference for parents of today. And we didn't need it so much campaigns and activities because we had some people who were really active to close institutions. But now, as I said, parents are active today to keep and have those rights families have today, so they don't lose them if we have a wrong political direction. I'm quite right now there. I think I go faster here. We had some pictures of course, Swedish society has to follow the United Nations Convention, and we have national plan for disability politics, and every municipality is also making their disability plan. And this picture is the latest in the city of Stockholm. And I heard that budget of city of Stockholm have picked up a lot of things from this program now for coming year. And of course, this is a right place to talk about this. When Europe had a disability year for several years ago, they always said nothing about us without us. That means that you can't in society decide things for those with disabilities without talking and cooperating with those people who really knows what this about. That's people with disabilities and their organizations. It's absolutely must to cooperate and take care of experiences made by disability organizations. Otherwise, it's not correct disability politics. And who was that man who influenced to stop living in institutions? That was a man, Carl Grunewald. That was a child psychiatric practice. He was inspector of National Board of Health in state level in Sweden, and he traveled around and controlled all institutions in 60s and 70s. And he really told about to decision makers how did it look like. That was a sad story of Swedish history and history to have all those people living in institutions. And he had cooperation with two famous Swedish politicians. Bengt Lindqvist was social minister, blind man, very active in disability issues, and Bengt Westerberg, he is still working and active in human rights issues. Carl Grunewald told them how does it look like. They were interested to make a change and decided in their governments to close institutions and decide for that LSS law for support for families. So we had three very important men in that disability historia, and thank you for them. And I'm going now to give your organization some gift. It's Christmas time. It's important time in Sweden. And City of Stockholm decided to we didn't want it to lose Carl Grunewald's message and history. He had so much to tell, and he died. He was more than 90 years old for some years ago, and we were successful and were interviewing him and telling how was the history of life for people with intellectual disability hundreds years back in Sweden, and what happened when we closed institutions. We have a film about that. It's perhaps a bit old-fashioned CD, but we have text in Swedish, in English in that version, so it could help you. And then we have a second film there. That's a story about how did life became after closing institution, and that's interview, for instance, with 4 persons who have been living in institutions. So I have 4 packs of that, so you can decide in organizations who is going to look at them when you perhaps have a conference for that. And then one more. Here is a little book, I can say that it's book. To the right to a home of my own. And there is, we are comparing Nordic countries, Norway, Denmark, Sweden and Finland, how we have been working to make it possible to move to your own home. So this will be, I don't know who is going to receive that here, but I have them here. I'm going to leave them to you. Yeah. I'm sorry that I have been talking too long time.
지금 마이크를 사용하지 않고 여기 질문을 하실 분들이 많이 있을 거라고 생각합니다. 그래서 질문을 조금 이렇게 작성해서 물론 손 들고 할 수도 있는데 그럼 시간이 너무 오래 걸리기 때문에 웬만하면 써서 앞에서 혹시 누가 우리 스태프에게 좀 전해주시고요. 그럴 전에 여기 이제 앞서 모시고 다른 질문 한 가지 정도 한 가지 하고 있을 테니까 쭉 모아서 앞으로 좀 보내주셨으면 좋겠습니다. 우리 이따 씨 앞으로 모실게요. 네, 쭉 얘기해 주신 거 보니까 한국은 스웨덴의 한 40년 전부터 지금 현재의 스웨덴 모습까지를 한꺼번에 담고 있다 이런 생각이 들어요. 그래서 인식의 변화나 이런 것들은 어느 정도 한국 사회도 막 지금 시민으로서 인권의 주체로서 권리한 주체로서 생각하는 발달장애에 대해서 그렇게 생각하는 인식들은 어느 정도 또 조금 왔으면서도 지금 바로 옆에서 다른 섹션에서 열리는 학교에서 막 뽑혀갖고 막 이런 일까지 지금 동시대적으로 벌어지는 게 한국 사회가 아닌가 생각이 듭니다. 그래서 좀 뭐랄까 그런 부분은 참 슬픈 것 같아요. 네, 우리가 그 사회가 발전하면 인식도 발전하고 제도도 발전하고 관행도 발전 여러 가지가 발전하면서 쭉 와야 되는데 그 굉장히 뭐랄까 호전적인 그런 상태도 있으면서 또 우리가 이렇게 지금의 어떤 이런 자리도 이제 이런 얘기까지 하는 자리도 있는데 이런 다양한 스펙트럼이 동시대로 벌어지는 뭔가 좀 과거를 잘 청산하지 못한 것이 너무 많아서 그런 거 생각하면 좀 슬픈 것 같고 이번 좀 이제 시대가 많이 변해왔기 때문에 우리도 과감하게 청산해야 될 그 과거의 적폐들은 너무 청산하고 새 시대로 넘어갔으면 좋겠다 이런 생각이 좀 많이 듭니다. 이 통역하면서 우리 이제 스웨덴에서 그룹홈이라고 표현하신 거를 지금 통역하면서 지원주택으로 좀 소개를 많이 했어요. 한국의 그룹홈하고 너무 달라가지고 여기서 또 이제 말씀하실 때 그룹홈이라는 것을 우리 한국에서 그룹홈이라고 통역하면은 지금 현재 우리의 그룹홈을 생각하실까봐 지원주택이라고 좀 많이 설명을 했는데요. 그 이제 지금 한국의 그룹홈과 지금 스웨덴의 그룹홈의 형태는 좀 많이 다른 것 같아요. 그래서 저희의 그룹홈은 이제 4명이 살고 2명이 한 방에 살고 그 정해진 일과에 따라서 움직이는 게 그룹홈이다 보니까 그런 점에서 차이가 있기 때문에 좀 다르게 이제 좀 많이 변형해드렸는데 그러다 보니까 또 아마 들으시는 분들 중에 이 한국의 지원주택이 뭐 얼마나 있다고 뭐 있기는 있어? 서울만 있지 지방은 없어 뭐 이런 입장들이 또 딱 있으셨을 것 같거든요. 여기서 이제 얘기하고자 하는 것은 스웨덴에서 지금 대형 거주시설에서 대안적 모델로 얘기하고 있는 그룹홈이라는 형식은 지금 한국에서 보면 가장 유사하게 설명할 수 있는 용어가 그룹홈이었다라는 측면에서 그렇게 좀 이렇게 여러 가지 해석을 그렇게 해드렸다라고 부연 설명을 드립니다. 이쯤 되면 이제 질문지가 어떻게 올 거라고 했는데 그러면은 너무 적기도 힘들다. 나는 정말 말로 할래. 이런 분들이 있으신 것 같아요. 그렇죠? 그래서 지금 다 못 적으신 거죠? 그래서 나는 정말 말로 그냥 짧고 아주 굵고 요약적으로 하겠다라고 하시는 분들이 먼저 손을 들고 할 동안 나머지 질문 마저 쓰실 분들은 써서 이렇게 앞으로 모아주시면 되겠습니다. 예, 먼저 질문을 내가 선정하겠다. 우리가 다 같이 스웨덴 가서 쫙 봤으면 좋았을 텐데 그렇게 못하니까 지금 아주 중요한 분이 오셨으니까 빼지 말고 질문해 주시기 바랍니다. 예, 앞에 잠깐 소개하시면서 질문 부탁드립니다.
안녕하세요. 저는 성남에서 온 지금 고등학생 17살 남학생을 가진 지적장애를 가진 엄마입니다. 다름이 아니고 지원주택 이렇게 탈시설화라고 지금 가지고 있는데 저희 아이 특성은 도전적 행동을 가지고 있어서 과연 어떻게 탈시설화시켜서 어떻게 얘를 독립을 시킬까 고민이 되고 있는데 스웨덴에서는 어떻게 이렇게 도전적 행동을 가진 대상자를 어떻게 지원하고 있는지 궁금합니다.
네, 이제 번역 데스크가 될 것 같고요.
I hope I understood your question, but otherwise you can add. What I understood, it was about people also with challenging behavior. Was that? Yes, yes. Mm. And in Sweden, you had discussions how when institutions should be closed, that should some anyway, with, for instance, with challenging behavior, aggressivity, and also they were talking about very old people, should they be left in institutions and all other should move out? And decision was nobody should be left in institutions. And that question, is it possible to move to society with that kind of behavior? Answer to this is that you must make surroundings, your home and your support on that way that it works for that individual needs. And we had I have so many examples when people had been very destructive and aggressive and had challenging behavior. Their behavior changed when they moved from those big houses with stuff running around with the white medical clothes. They didn't know about those other ones who were living there. When they moved to small units, they know each of those other ones who are living there. Staff knows that person's needs, and we have more methods for staff to think more about what's happening when you are doing like this and that. When that person is behaving on that strange way, what happened before? Was that always when John was working there? Was that always when Anne was working there? What did they do when these things happen? How to change that? And we have found out that it's less problems when those persons has moved to those small group homes. But that's my opinion, that it has not been possible to move to your own apartment alone in society. It has been necessary to move to those small units with professional staff. It's possible to move out, and it's possible to work more, that it's not your fault that you have that kind of behaving. What are we doing when you react like that? That's the new point of seeing the situation.
예, 한국에서는 사실 그 시설장님들이 되게 자주 만나고 많이 만나는데 계속 시설을 유지해야 되는 이유로 이런 도전적 행동을 하시는 반달장님 예의를 꼭 드시거든요. 그리고 그게 전부있는 얘기를 하셔가지고, 그런데 지금 굉장히 좋은 얘기를 해주신 것 같아요. 대전제는 누구도 배제되지 않는 세상이다. 그럼 우리가 그 문제 어떻게 해결할래? 라고 논의하기 시작했다라고 얘기를 해주셨고요. 그리고 또 되게 중요한 포인트가 그 개인들에 대한 환경을 좀 더 개별적이고 좀 더 그 안정적인 환경으로 지원했을 때 대규모의 그룹화된 서비스보다는 굉장히 개별적인 서비스를 제공했을 때 개인의 스트레스가 줄어들고, 그래서 과잉 행동은 줄어들고 혹은 또 예측 가능한 과잉 행동도 막을 수 있다는 아주 중요한 얘기를 해주신 것 같고, 우리 복지가 지향해야 될 방향을 제시해 주신 거라고 생각합니다. 너무 감사드리고요. 하실 동안 두 개의 질문이 들어왔어요. 이 질문들을 먼저 하나 드리면, 저희 장애인분들 중에는 지금 표현하실 때 지적장애로 표현을 하셨어요. 근데 저희가 지적과 내병변 장애가 중복장애로, 그래서 우리가 더 중증이다라고 많이 표현을 장애 그룹이 있죠. 그런 경우에 대해서는 어떤 의료적 지원이나 돌봄 지원, 그리고 또 주택에 입주할 시에 또 여기서 또 약간 설명을 드리면, 우리는 지적장애인들이 입주할 주택을 고를 때 편의시설을 안 갖춘 주택도 많이 제공을 하거든요. 그러니까 편의시설을 당연히 갖춘 주택을 제공하면은 이런 질문이 안 나왔을 텐데, 발달장애인용 그룹홈은 편의시설이 안 된 그룹홈도 많이 제공하기 때문에 아마 이 질문을 하는 것 같은데, 그렇게 이제 중복한 이제 내병변과 지적장애를 가진 아주 중요한 장애를 가진 경우에 의료적 지원, 또 돌봄이 더 필요한 경우, 그리고 주택에서도 그냥 지적장애인보다는 편의시설까지도 고려해야 되는 경우에 대해서는 예산이 많이 필요하다라는 이유로 조금 그런 부분에 대해서 이제 좀 지원이 미진할 수가 있는데, 아까 소개한 LSS법이나 이런 법률이나 이런 데에 그런 더 중환장애를 가진 사람들에 대한 부분이 좀 더 구체적으로 담겨 있는지, 그러니까 아까 조금 LSS법이 지금 소개된 것으로 보면은 그냥 지적장애보다는 굉장히 더 중환장애를 가진 사람을 위한 특별한 법인 것처럼 지금 약간 해석이 되어 있거든요. 그렇게 소개되어 있는데, 그렇다면 거기에 아주 더 구체적으로 그런 내용들이 제시가 되어 있는지 이제 이슈를 궁금해 하고 있습니다. 네.
Thank you for very good questions. So I can explain more about LSS. LSS law was for all kind of disabilities where you have special needs in your everyday life. And in that law you decided 3 special groups that law is about. And the first one is people with intellectual disabilities and with autism. And autism-like diagnosis like Asperger's syndrome and so on. And second group was people who have got brain damage when they are adults. And it's a lot about traffic accidents, diving accidents, other kind of brain damages. Nowadays also this law, you use that when a person have got dementia disease before 65 age. So that second group is brain damages. And the third one, your question was about when you can have multiple problems, you can have intellectual disability, you can have cerebral palsy, you can have neurologic diagnosis, you can need a lot of support all day, night long. That's the third group in that legislation. So there is, and that group is, that last one is very, very important, especially for support with personal assistance. Because you have there people who have studied a lot, they have a profession, they can go to working life, and in this law they have possibilities to have personal assistance also to their working place. So LSS law is for all kind of disabilities and all mixes in that. The only important thing is that you have big difficulties because of your disability. I hope that was a correct answer.
아마 저희가 이제 여기 지금 이제 3 그룹으로 나눠가지고 중증 복합장애도 이제 지원을 특별히 더 하고 있다라고 말씀하시면서 PA 프로그램을 이제 서비스를 소개를 했는데 아까 개인별 지원 체계를 다 수립한다고 말씀을 해주셨잖아요. 그래서 우리처럼 개인별 지원 체계가 말만 있지 이제 실제는 없는 나라에서는 굉장히 뭔가 법에 나열돼 있어야지 뭔가 되니까. 아마 이제 질문의 의도는 이제 그러니까 법에 더 구체적으로 나열되어 있느냐 이런 질문이었던 것 같고 이제 스웨덴에서는 이렇게 3개의 그룹이 있고 마지막 그룹 모두 하여튼 다 개별화된 서비스를 계획하고 사정하고 지원하니까 그 3번째 그룹도 마찬가지로 그렇게 3번째 그룹으로 하고 이제 지원하고 있다라는 설명을 이제 해주신 거거든요. 그러니까 우리도 사실 이제 형식은 지금 막 만들어 가고는 있죠. 형식적으로는. 이제 개인별 지원 계획을 수립한다고는 되어 있죠. 근데 이제 각 발달센터가 몇 명에 대한 개인별 지원 계획을 수립해서 또 이행할 권한이 있냐 없냐 이게 사실은 저희 한국사에서 또 관건이 아닌가 싶습니다. 지금 이제 거기까지 우리는 그 정도까지 가 있는 상태다 보니까 이제 이런 거고요. 또 한 질문은요. 아까 그 예산 축소 관련해서 이제 우리가 한국 사회에서 유럽이나 또 북유럽을 소개할 때 복지 예산이 많이 축소되고 있다. 뭐 이런 식의 소개들이 좀 많이 좀 되고 있잖아요. 그래서 아마 질문을 하신 것 같은데요. 이제 질문하신 분도 예산을 줄인다고 하는 것을 2017년도에 뭐 뉴스 같은 데서 보신 것 같아요. 그래서 혹시 장애나 복지 예산이 정말 스웨덴 정부가 축소를 하고 있는지 해마다 그렇게 줄고 있는 것인지 그리고 또 하나의 질문은 시설보호보다 지역사회 거주가 예산이 더 적게 든다 이런 연구는 혹시 없는지 이 2가지 질문을 하셨습니다. 저희가 한국에서 소개할 때 막 이런 얘기 하죠. 유럽도 복지예산 줄인데 그것 봐. 우리도 너무 과하게 썼어라고 얘기를 했는데 모르겠어요. 유럽은 임계점을 딱 찍고 나서 이제 좀 줄이자 이런 얘기가 뭐 예를 들어 이제 뭐 다 같이 되고 있는지 모르겠는데 우리는 지금 OECD 가입국의 평균 수준도 못 미치는 수준에 있거든요. 그런데 지금 막 유럽을 예를 들고 있는 게 한국 사회의 현실이다 보니까 이 질문을 하셨다고 생각이 듭니다.
Now I have to be a bit sorry because I have difficulties to hear in this one. So I didn't understand the questions exactly.
첫 번째 질문은요.
Short.
네, 짧게. 스웨덴에서 복지 예산을 실제로 줄이고 있냐? 그게 해마다 줄고 있냐? 해마다 줄면 어느 정도냐? 이게 첫 번째 질문.
In Sweden.
스웨덴에서.
In Sweden, Swedish government, they have not changed laws, but they have ordered some investigations about personal assistance. If in the beginning they were started to discuss if children under 12 years old shouldn't be able to have personal assistance and not people over 65. And those limits were discussing. And then otherwise cuts have been in municipalities and especially in area of escort services. Because in LSS legislation you can apply service for escort to leisure time activities. Somebody join you, so it's possible for you to go to swim, go to cinema, go to what you want. And the municipalities have those last years made cuts in that how much and who is going to have that kind of support. And it has been a reason for protest, especially about personal assistance. Families have been on streets like you do here in South Korea, fighting. They already says, is it time? Do you want that our children will move back to institutions again if it's not possible to give them personal assistance when they are younger than 12 years? And now we have several political parties who says, stop, don't touch it. And otherwise that escort services, it's an issue for municipalities, and you have to go to court with individual cases to have decision to win over municipality. But that's to try to find cuts to have lower taxes.
예, 그런 부분에서도 한국하고 스웨덴은 호떡같네요. 그죠? 네, 많이 줬다고 연구해가지고 막 뭐라도 좀 자르려고 하는 그 항상의 그 예산 담당자들과 예, 권리를 확장시키고자 하는 이 당사자들의 투쟁은 스웨덴이나 한국 똑같습니다. 예, 우리가 스웨덴처럼 발전해도 투쟁해야 된다라는 결론인 것 같습니다. 네. 예, 그리고 또 하나의 질문이 그 거주 시설을 운영했었을 때보다 그 예산이 지역사회의 장애인이 나와 살 때 그 예산이 더 적게 든다라는 연구가 혹시 있는지. 근데 좀 약간 상황은 좀 다를 것 같아요. 지금 스웨덴 이 탈설이 너무 오래전에 이루어진 얘기라서 조금 상황은 다를 것 같은데. 그러니까
there is no, I really don't know studies about that costs could be lower after moving to institutions. It has been a reform for society to give people with disabilities same rights than other citizens. But you have studies about that young people, as I said earlier, that we don't destroy them in young age. They are included in daycare with other children from the beginning. We don't have any special daycare for small kids. Swedish children used to go to daycare when they are 1.5 years about, and they are always included with other children. And that means that also children meet all kind of children, and children's parents meet all kind of children, and you are on that way more prepared to take part of society. And then those costs for municipalities, there is a stately support system for municipalities that in state level they decide a budget for disability support for municipalities where they have many people who need LSS services. They receive more money from state supporting those services, and that's because when institutions were placed in a municipality, many of people stayed in same municipality also outside of institution, and that could be very expensive for small municipalities to have had institution in their area. So that's why Swedish state decided to give support for LSS support for municipalities, and it depends on how many people have decision about those rights. And one important issue too, it's always person, him, herself, or parents, if you are a child, who are applying support by LSS. It's never force with that. Municipality can say, now you must have this and that. It's always person, him, herself, or parents who are applying support. And if you are not able to take a decision about that, you have, of course, people who have a job to support you, to help you to, in legal way, apply for a person who can't do that himself. So it's never force, it's always because I need that, because I want that.
네, 아까 이제 뭐 시스템 달라서 그런 연구 뭐 이런 얘기는 물어보신 분이 계신데, 예산이 더 줄어들었느냐라고 하면은, 예를 들어 미국이나 이런 데서 그런 예산이 더 지역사회로 나올 때 예산도 적게 되니까 지역사회로 탈설화를 예산 때문에 추진했다. 그러다가 그 장애인분들이 노숙인이 됐다. 뭐 이런 식의 부정적인 연구가 또 소개된 바가 있기 때문에 아마 그 질문을 또 하셨을 수도 있는데, 근데 사실 지금 한국 사회로 보면 거주시설에 지금 약 5천억 원 정도 쓰고 있습니다. 국고보조금만, 중앙정부 예산만 말씀드리는 겁니다. 5천억 원 정도를 쓰고 있는데, 활동보조 예산은 9천억 원이 조금 넘지요. 어느새 이렇게 2배 이상 활동보조 서비스 예산이 늘었는데요. 과거에는 사실은 시설 예산밖에 없었던 시절이 있었습니다. 그런 시절에서 지금 이제 시대가 많이 변해서 활동보조 같은 개인별 지원 서비스가 거주시설의 2배 육갑하는 예산으로 이렇게 좀 사회는 변화해 왔습니다. 근데 그럼에도 어쨌든 시설에 살고 있는 사람들이 지역사회에 나온다고 했을 때 충분한 서비스를 받기 위해서는 한국 사회를 분석해 봤을 때, 발바닥에 분석해 봤을 때는 시설보다 탈시설이 더 예산이 든다. 하지만 그 예산 써야 한다라는 입장입니다. 아마 부모님들도 거기 같은 입장일 거라고 생각이 들고요. 또 얘기하신 것 중에 또 포인트는 저는 뭐라고 생각하냐면은 우리도 중앙정부 예산이 있고 펀드 매칭하는 예산이 있잖아요. 그러니까 지방정부는 중앙정부 예산에서 펀드 매칭하는 예산은 권한 없이 그냥 펀드 매칭하거든요. 근데 이제 지금 우리가 생각하는 대규모 거주시설들은 다 그렇게 국고보조금이 결정되면 지방정부가 펀드 매칭하는 방식이에요. 그래서 그것도 지방정부가 우리는 이건 대형시설이니까 안 할래라는 의견이 별로 없어요. 가질 수가 없어요. 그런 예산 구조거든요. 그러니까 그런데 반면에 우리가 지역사회하고 그래도 보다 더 통합적인 서비스다라고 생각하는 그 지원주택이나 이런 형태들은 다 시도정부, 그러니까 지방정부 예산입니다. 국고보조금이 안 들어가요. 그러니까 이제 지방정부를 탈시설화 정책으로 더 견인하려면 중앙정부가 너희가 지금 아까 데이케어도 모든 아이들이 같이 이용하는 그런 이용시설을 했을 때 스웨덴이 중앙정부에서 더 지원을 해줌으로써 지방정부의 정책을 유도하잖아요. 그 소개를 지금 잠깐 하셨는데 우리도 우리가 사회통합형이고 좀 더 그런 환경들을 더 만들려고 하면은 중앙정부 예산을 지원하고 지방정부도 거기에 따라가게 해야 전국 골고루 발전할 수 있을 거라고 생각하는데 지금 우리 대한민국 정부는 그런 부분에 있어서 굉장히 미진하다 못해 없는 수준입니다라고 소개를 드릴 수 있을 것 같습니다. 네. 그 다음 질문을 또 하나 할게요. 지금 한국에서 최근에 이제 벌어진 일들이 그 대구 지역에서 장애인이 이 빌라 안으로 이사 오겠다고 했더니 그 입주민들이 우리 빌라에 장애인 사는 거 싫다라고 해서 벽보를 붙였잖아요. 그런 게 기사화됐던 거 기억하시죠? 네, 그럴 정도로 지역사회에서 이 장애인에 대한 정말 상식 이하의 님비라고 할까요? 그런 혐오적인 이 발언을 하는 것을 부끄러워해야 하는데 부끄러워하지 않고 하는 사람들이 있습니다. 그게 이제 한국의 현실이라고 말씀을 드리면서 이 발달장애인이 시설로 나왔을 때 스웨덴에서는 시민들의 인식을 개선하기 위해서 장애에 대한 인식을 개선하기 위해서 어떤 구체적인 노력이 있었나요?
Of course, in that time when you had decision to close institutions, there were a lot of news about that in the media. But anyway, I could feel that, for instance, when I was preparing that in City of Stockholm, that it was important to support disability administration in city before when you are planning, for instance, housing in society, to invite to that project and have information about what are we doing here, what's going to happen, information about what kind of disabilities it's about, and also promise them that if you have some problems, just call us. Tell to us to social services that this happens, because it's not about that you should have it worse in your neighborhood. We want to know if you have problems and tell that to staff who is working with people who are living there. That really give them a promise that if there is some problem, we are going to work with that. So don't worry about that. And because many of them thought that people are moving from institutions and there's empty house, it happens unlocked, there is our children can't play in playground, and there were so many worries about that. But I could see that when we organized that kind of information, that this is going to happen. We also showed, before people have moved to units, those group homes, we showed them, it looks like this, then you are not welcome, because this is somebody's home after when people have moved there. But now, when we are building, it looks like this, it's going to be like that, and promise them to give their opinion if something happens, because we want to know. And just be kind neighbors. Have a little party. Cook a bit of coffee. We are drinking a lot of coffee in Sweden. And I know people who are living in group homes who have now friends in neighborhood, that they become invited to coffee breaks to neighborhood. So information correctly and promise to listen to them if something happens. That's my advice.
네, 되게 우리 또 해요. 우리도 합시다. 예, 저희가 탈신을 지원한 후에 발달장애인 분들이 그 아파트나 이렇게 같이 사실 때 장애를 잘 모르셔갖고 그냥 막연한 두려움을 갖고 계셨잖아요, 이웃들이. 근데 그냥 아주 과감하게 우린 이렇게 살고 우린 이런 사람들이야 라고 얘기하고, 혹시 문제가 생기면 어떤 스태프들이 달려와서 일을 해결해 줄 테니까 걱정하지 마 라는 얘기를 다 하고 있다고 하시네요. 그러니까 우리는 사실은 그런 정도까지는 못했던 것 같아요. 사실 그 이웃들에게 이렇게 우리가 먼저 이렇게 두드려서 개방하고 이런 좀 더 적극적인 노력이 좀 더 우리도 필요하겠다 이런 생각이 듭니다. 물론 그런 걸 설명하지 않아도 되는 사회면 더 좋겠지만, 제가 봤을 때 당분간은 우리가 발달장애인이 지역사회의 이웃으로 함께 살아가려면 어느 정도 이제 쌍방간의 그런 노력들이 필요하겠다 이런 생각이 듭니다. 네, 또 이제 질문이 계속 나오네요. 네, 또 질문요. 아까 이제 2000년에까지 이제 마지막으로 문 닫았을 때 마지막에 남아있던 게 52개 시설이고 1000명 정도가 있었다라고 소개를 해주셨거든요. 근데 이제 궁금한 거죠. 만약에 LSS나 이렇게 쭉 해서 지원이 이루어졌음에도 불구하고 그러면 마지막에 남았던 1000명은 왜 어떤 이유로 남아 있었을까? 라고 하는 궁금함. 네.
Many of those 1,000 who were left did have serious problems. They had several kind of needs, movement disability, as you earlier asked about, challenging behavior. Some of them very old, and I can say same discussion is ongoing now in Finland. Finland has decided to close institutions 2020. It's 2 years left. And they have now discussion who should be definitely left in institution, that it couldn't be possible for them to move. And all the time, I'm born in Finland, and my mother language is Finnish, so I feel a lot for Finland too. And I'm saying nobody will be left there, because perhaps it should be better to move those with very, very, very heavy needs first, because they really can have a very changed situation in new circumstances. And that was also a mistake in Finland, that those 1,000 last were left because of their very serious needs. And yes, they moved last, but they have moved, and now I want to tell shortly story about two men, 80 years old. They were found on street in Stockholm when they were babies, and you could see that they had big difficulties. And when they were 80 years old, it was a plan to move that area. There I was responsible for disability issues. We had planned, they got their own home room, kitchen part and bathroom and those social spaces. And staff in institution, they who were moving also to that place as staff, they had ordered to take those old men to IKEA and buy everything to their kitchen, to their sleeping room, to their, what they needed. And I promised those two men, 80 years old, that when you have moved to your new home, I'm coming to you with coffee bread, and we are taking coffee break together because I want to see how it looks like. And when I went to them to that coffee break, I was asking them each, what's the most lovely thing after your moving? Nobody of them wanted back to institution, but I asked them, what was the most lovely thing you like after moving? One of them showed the sign of his name on the door. He had never seen his name on any place in his 80 years old life. And the other one showed me a mailbox on his door. That was a mailbox with his name, and he received his own post in his own place. First time in his life, 80 years has gone. And all those people who ask if it's too late, that it should be too late to move when you are 80. It was really time to move after 80 years in institutions, and they became very happy until their death.
아, 진짜 박수 한번 쳐주세요. 저기 시설장님들 모였을 때 또 한번 강의해 주셔야 되는데, 아니 제가 시설장님들 모였을 때 맨날 듣는 얘기가 탈소라 다 좋은데 우리 시설은 다 이제 고령화돼서 안 돼. 평균 연령이 어떻게 되십니까? 했더니 이제 거의 다 50이 되셨다는 거예요. 그래서 직접 발달장애인은 50이면 이미 고령화하기 때문에 안 된다라는 얘기를 하시는 원장님들이 하도 많으셔가지고 그랬는데 80년을 시설에 사신 80세 노인을 이렇게 한마디로 자립시킨 이야기잖아요. 예, 정말 대단한 이야기인 것 같아요. 그리고 이제 발달장애인 자립이 우리가 생각하는 독거가 아니라, 사회는 자꾸 자립을 독거라고 생각하는데 독거가 아니라, 자립은 연립이기도 하고 공동체 사회 속에서 같이 사는 거잖아요. 우리 80세, 우리는 지금 한국 사회는 그 장애가 있거나 없거나 80세쯤 되면은 시설로 가는 것처럼 구조가 막 만들어져 가고 있어가지고 저의 미래도 불안한데, 스웨덴 사회가 주는 이 많은 교훈들을 한국 사회에서 우리도 정책적으로 많이 녹여내야 될 것 같습니다. 네, 또 질문이 있어요. 뭐냐면 한국은 만약에 내가 지역사회에 산다라고 했을 때 복지관도 가고 싶고 복지관이 다를 것 같은데 어쨌든 복지관도 가고 싶고 활동보조도 이용하고 싶고 막 하는데 당장 이용하지 못하고 대기하는 경우가 많기 때문에 그 대기가 너무 길고, 그리고 또 이용하다가 다시 대기할지도 몰라서 그냥 할 수 없어서 시설로 가게 되는 경우, 즉 지역 인프라가 부족한 경우들이 많습니다. 스웨덴은 계획을 짤 때 이 사람한테 뭐뭐뭐가 필요하다는 계획을 짜더라도 현실에서 그렇게 서비스할 수 있는 인력이 부족하다거나 어느 이용기관을 이용하지 못한다거나 하는 경우는 없나요?
understand the question. Was that about private and municipal support?
네네.
It was about that.
일단 어떤 장애인이 시설이 아니라 지역사회에 살 때 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 프로그램을 이용할 수 있다라고 결정한 후에 근데 실제로는 1, 2, 3까지는 되는데 4, 5는 없어. 이런 경우는 없나요?
I have very big difficulties to hear. I don't know why.
예. 그러니까 사회가 달라서 그런가 봐요. 어떤 사람한테
Repeat one simple.
어떤 장애인한테 서비스가 100% 필요한데 실제로 이용하려고 했더니 서비스는 50%밖에 없는 거예요. 예를 들어 이용할 수 있는 이용할 수 있는 주간보호 시설이 없거나 활동 보조인이 없거나 이런 경우들은 없나요?
Okay. I must say sorry that male person, our connections must be something wrong because I hear the lady very well, but not that man. I think my husband should say the same, that I don't listen to him. Yes. Of course, even if I'm telling about support and services by LSS and so on, all people with disabilities are not satisfied with what they have received. Some of them, as you said, they should need 100% and they receive only 50%. It happens. But in that Swedish system, if you have applied support by LSS law, you can, if you are not satisfied with decision, it has been half of that or only part of what you have been applied, you can go to court with that decision and make a decision in court if that decision was correct or not. And social worker who is deciding after investigation, first you apply. If you apply for the right, then there is investigation and decision. In same time when social worker is leaving to you decision, he have to inform you how to complain to court. And social worker has responsibility to help you to go to court. And there they of course see, is that social worker right? Did she or he read that law on correct way, or was that too little support when they are studying the issue?
네, 우리는 만약에 서비스 양을 충분히 아예 사정 단계에서 충분히 받지 못했을 때 이의제기 절차는 있으나 이의제기 절차를 이용하시는 분들은 거의 없다고 봐야 하죠. 그 이의제기 절차를 이용해봤자 나에게 돌아올 답은 뻔하니까 아예 이의제기를 안 하는 사회라면 여기는 이제 내 서비스를 받은 거에 대한 이의제기를 할 수 있고 그걸 또 사회복지사가 도와줘야 한다라고 말씀하신 거고요. 네, 이제 제가 이 질문을 또 더 이어서 드리지는 않을게요. 제가 또 따로 사석에서 좀 물어봐가지고 마저 질문을 하도록 할게요.
I have one fine point of view. Sometimes when social workers feel that, oh, this situation is very, very complicated, I don't know what's the right decision. So sometimes they make a decision and say to the person, I think you should complain this because I want to have final opinion of if my way of reading that law is correct. So it happens.
우리는 참 이런 표현이 있어요. 사회복지사가 문지기 역할을 하면 안 되는데 문지기다 뭐 이런 얘기를 하는 농담 같은 게 있거든요. 오히려 이제 사회복지사들이 이제 충분히 그 서비스에 대해서 평가라는 건지 그렇지만 어쨌든 사정하고 그래서 충분히 줘야 되는 위치에 있는데 오히려 더 문지기처럼 서비스의 양을 자르는 역할을 하기 때문에 그런 비판도 나오기도 하고 합니다. 근데 지금 이제 어쨌든 말씀해주신 것들은 이제 사회복지가 이제 권리로서 이제 보장되는 어떤 측면에서 말씀해주셨다고 생각이 듭니다. 저희가 40분까지는 꼭 끝내달라고 주최 측에서 얘기를 해주셔가지고 요 질문과 또 마지막에 이제 좀 더 추가적으로 하나만 더 이제 마지막 소감을 묻고 마무리하려고 합니다. 그 유엔 장애인 권리 협약에서 여기도 보면 스웨덴 정부도 뭔가를 막 지적받았다고 이렇게 표현하셨어요. 근데 우리가 생각하기에는 우리 정부도 많이 지적을 받았어요. 근데 받았는데 이제 잘 이행을 이제 우리는 좀 잘 안 하고 있는데. 어쨌든 스웨덴에서 유엔 장애인 권리 협약에서 뭐뭐를 더 이해해야 된다고 지적을 받았다 이런 표현이 있었었는데요. 뭘 지적받았는지 너무 궁금해요. 그리고 그것들을 그러면 스웨덴 정부는 그것을 이제 개선하기 위해서 어떤 노력들을 하고 있는지 이렇게 답해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다.
Thank you for that question because it's so exciting. As I said earlier, Swedish nation used to feel that they are best in the world in everything. And of course also in disability issues. Swedish society is, yes, it's a good example in giving social services to poor and rich and everything there between. But now it's time to take care of responsibilities in United Nations Conventions articles. And Sweden government decided to follow that convention since 2009. And in Swedish government's first report to United Nations, they described how they have been working and disability movement. They sent to United Nations double so thick story about how does it works in real life. And when United Nations came back to Swedish government with report after everything they had been studied and read, they pointed out 30 different points and we should be better in Sweden. And that was of course a disappointment for government, but it was. And there were very many interesting issues. It was, you must be better in fighting against violence against disabled people, especially women. You must better take care of children perspective in disability care. You must observe so many suicides in disability area. You must take better care of people with psychiatric problems. You are not used so much forcing activities in psychiatric services, closing or doing things like that. You must be better in giving real work for people with disabilities. You must work much, much more hard so people with disabilities can move around in society in accessibility issues and communication, but especially physical accessibility. And so on and so. If you are interested, I'm going to send you their opinions in 30 points where we have to be better. And now Swedish government is working with laws and regulation to answer those 30 critical points. So let's see how that will finish. But I can say that to be awake and know so much as possible about Human Rights Convention for disabled people, it helps forward, because now in Swedish disability politics they says that all administration in stately, regional and municipal level have to have more information about human rights for people with disabilities.
그 30개를 구체적으로 소개해 주신다고 하니까 그걸 좀 기대해 봐야 될 것 같고요. 그 정부 보고서 나간 다음에 여기도 이제 민간 보고서, 아까 장애인 단체가 냈다는 게 민간 보고서거든요. 우리 정부도 그래요. 우리 정부가 낸 다음에 저희 이 부모연대도 참여한 단체들이 모여서 민간 보고서를 내서 정부 주장은 조금 이게 뭐 과한 거다. 실제로 현실은 이렇다라고 하면 이제 유엔에서 지적을 해주는데. 좀 이제 30개 이제 보내준다고 하니까 그걸 좀 참고해서 한국 사회도 좀 참고해도, 사실 한국 사회는 유엔에서 뭐 권고하면 권고해도 안 지켜. 그래서 그런 거 보면은 이런 국제 규약에 가입하고도 이 안 지키는 이 뻔뻔함에 대해서 참 그런데 꼭 지키게, 우리 정부가 꼭 지키게 하는 노력도 또한 다시 한번 민간 단체가 요구해야 될 지점이라고 생각을 합니다. 네, 그 한국에 오셔서 여러 차례 이제 발표를 하셨어요. 너무 참 감동 받았고 저는 되게 한국 사회에 주는 교훈이 굉장히 많다고 생각합니다. 특히 오늘은 이 부모 단체에서 이렇게 열리는 컨퍼런스인데요. 특히 이제 스웨덴의 부모들의 힘으로 스웨덴 특히 발달장애 정책을 많이 바꾼 일들이 굉장히 뭐랄까 그 혁신적인 일들을 한 부모들의 어떤 힘들이 있었을 것 같아요. 부모들의 어떤 역할이 있었을 것 같아요. 그래서 우리 이 한국 사회 이 부모님들에게 어떠한 부모들이 이렇게 노력을 해줘서 스웨덴이 바뀌었다 이런 얘기들을 좀 마지막으로 해주신다면 어떤 게 있을까요?
Last message to Korean parents. I should like to support you in really also as parents read United Nations Convention. What does human rights means to your children, young adults with disability? Because it's so interesting to put those articles in real life. And my absolute message is that to live up to those human rights is not to live in institutions. It's to move out to closer and into society, and that means that you have to fight in front of your politicians and decision makers. If South Korea wants to be a happy land for all Koreans, it must also include people with disabilities. They are not allowed to be left behind. And they can have evidence today when we have made changes. And we still have to fight together in all countries. But good start is to come to society. People see you moving around in streets. You are not a strange, scaring person. You are somebody, some of us, because any day it can happen to me and to my family. It's easy to tell that even to politicians, because that day that happens something for their families, they become suddenly more interested. I have seen that in City Hall in Stockholm too. And but also, as I said earlier, it doesn't help to close institutions. It's also important to support outside of institutions, for families and for disabled people themselves. It's very, very important. So keep on fighting.
네. 마지막 문장이 제일 중요한 것 같네요. 계속해서 싸움을 해나가시기 바랍니다. 네, 그 말씀하셨듯이 그 한국만 부모들이 이렇게 싸우는 게 아니다. 라는 거고요.
1 minute.
네, 네.
What? I was already earlier, because I'm so honest, so I tell you also what we are not doing so well. So I was telling you that we have to fight against the behavior where we stop people with disabilities and don't ask their own opinion and take them to us, to society. And I have a good friend in Finland, in Helsinki. She's also working with disability issues whole her life as me. And we have made a study material, a little book about human rights and 7 fights in everyday life. And we have that 7 fights in Swedish, and we have plans to give education to staff in where they are interested to come and point out some important articles in everyday life. How to live, how to decide over your important things, how to have friends, if you have interest to have own family, how to do, and so on. And we have example in that, we have pointed out some articles and then picked up some example from real life in Sweden and Finland. And then we have discussions point, how to discuss, how to change that situation so it should be to live and follow human rights. And it will be exciting because we have to do that all the time. So soon some place is changing manager, for instance. If the manager is not awake and says, no, we don't work like this in our place, stop it. If you don't have that kind of managers, it's not good. We need, all the time we have to think, what are we doing? Are we changing our way of working to more institution-like way of working? Stop it. Yeah.
아, 네네네. 아우, 감사합니다. 우리 너무 많은 이야기를 해주셨고요. 아까 말했듯이 이제 한국의 장애인 부모뿐만 아니라 전 세계의 장애인과 장애인 가족들이 싸워가지고 이 정도의 복지 수준 그리고 인권 의식을 만들어오기까지 최근 싸워왔다는 것이고, 그리고 끊임없이 이제 또 연구도 하시고 이러면서 지금 많은 메시지들을 계속 사회에 던지시는 것 같아요. 그 시설 폐쇄법이 한국에서 이렇게 논의될 때 그 시설 폐쇄가 이끄는 서비스의 중단 이렇게 자꾸 해석을 하는 악의적인 해석을 하는 사람들이 있습니다. 그것이 아니라 아까 지금 굉장히 중요한 원칙을 얘기해 주셨는데 인권의 의미가 시설이라고 하는 고립된 공간에서 벗어나서 이 사회의 일원으로 통합되는 것을 말하는 것이다. 거죠. 그래서 시설 폐쇄가 우리는 서비스의 중단이 아니라 시민으로서 그들이 이 자리에 함께 있기를 말하는 것이다라고 하는 것을 우리 부모연대와 더 많은 시민사회 단체들이 함께 싸워서 한국도 그런 시설이 없고 이 오직 지역사회 통합된 주거 서비스 많이 있는 사회로 변화시키기까지 함께 투쟁해 나갔으면 좋겠습니다. 긴 시간 동안에 통역하고 이렇게 말한다는 게 사실 쉽지 않아요, 그죠? 우리도 지금 통역기 끼고 있지만 쉽지 않은데 이 긴 시간을 우리 유타 씨가 이렇게 함께 해주셔서 너무너무 감사드리고요. 정말 이 모든 분들과 정말 한 번씩 포옹하고 끝내고 싶은데 그럴 수는 없고 제가 댓글 포옹하고 끝내는 기술로 정말 감사드립니다.